Watch more programs like this on cable and stream with PCN Select. Subscribe at PCNTV.com. This program has been paid for by the sponsor and does not reflect the views of PCN.
Welcome to another edition of PHRC Speaks, Housing, Fair Housing in the 21st Century. I'm your host, Adrian Garcia. Now, our topic today will focus on evictions during the COVID pandemic, or rather resources that can help individuals through those evictions. And our hope is that our audience member can see what initiatives exist out throughout the Commonwealth and hopefully become inspired to follow the footsteps of today's guest. Today's guest is Jennifer Lopez. She's the Executive Director of Friends Association, a nonprofit organization in Chester County. Welcome to PHRC Speaks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
I appreciate you making the time. I know you are all busy, but I saw something about your organization and I had to have you on here, especially in light of everything that's going on, moratoriums being lifted, moratoriums being extended, and so we wanted to have this conversation to give some of our Commonwealth audience an idea of what other programs exist out there. So first off, talk to me a little bit about Friends history. I understand that this organization's been around since 1822. Is that right?
That is correct. So next year we'll be celebrating our 200th anniversary. And I found some documentation saying that we are the oldest continuously operating child welfare agency in the Commonwealth. I have to verify that statistic, but we've been around a long time. Really at the core of our mission has always focused on families, children, and housing and keeping families together.
Awesome. Wow, almost 200 years. That's quite a trajectory. Yes. So what counties in the Commonwealth do you serve? Is it just Chester County or are there other adjacent counties that you serve?
We serve Chester County right now. So we do focus on the entire county. We're a population of a little over 500,000 people, 800 square miles. So we are a suburb of Philadelphia, very diverse population. We're one of the fastest growing counties in southeastern PA, and really in the mid-Atlantic region. One of the highest income counties in PA, 24th highest in the nation. So, but a single mom with one child would have to earn $52,000 a year to afford housing. And that's 356% above the federal poverty level. So we have $1 million listings and a lot of wealth, but we have deep pockets of poverty that our neighbors are living in as well.
Wow. So, I mean, with a trajectory that starts in 1822, I understand there have been many programs throughout the years until the organization decided to focus on housing first initiatives. Can you share with us a little about this transition?
Sure. So, I have to pay homage to our founders in the city of Philadelphia in 1822. A group of Quaker women who were abolitionists met with the African-American community and started an orphanage, mostly for children who had lost their parents as a result of being enslaved. And for about 100 years, they provided housing and homes for children in Philadelphia. I've read some of our historical documents and they refer to the family and the family outings so that, the focus on providing a loving home and the underlying Quaker belief of the divinity and the value of every single member of our society has held through those 200 years. So we moved to Cheney University in the early 1900s and ran a girls' home there. Up until the early 70s, we moved to Westchester, continued to run the girls' home, and then branched into foster care and adoption services. And in 1982, we got a call from another social service agency saying that they had a family who was unhoused and asked if we could provide shelter for them. And that was the start of our emergency shelter program that continues to run today. We moved from a congregate shelter purchased an apartment building in the 80s. And what's really unique about our shelter is that it's 6 individual apartments. So it's very trauma informed by the nature of everyone having, their own home, their own apartment, a lock on their door. And we're also unique that we can keep families together. So we can serve single moms, single dads, 2-parent families, multi-generational, LGBTQ plus families. In almost 55% of cities nationwide, a family has to split up when they become unhoused. A dad has to go to a single men's shelter, mom goes to mom and kids shelter. We can keep the family together during that time of crisis and trauma, and it just leads to a more holistic healing. We're on the verge of doing a big renovation of the building. It's also a 200-year-old building almost. So we serve about 25 to 30 families a year in that building. So there's a lot of wear and tear. And we received funding to do a complete renovation using trauma-informed design and architecture. So really beyond our interactions with families, setting a healing space that helps the brain regulate and helps people on their journey to housing.
It does make a difference in terms of a mental buffer when A, you don't have to separate your family. B, when you can have a lock on the door, and the space feels like it's yours. So it does make a great bit of difference on the trauma end of it, right?
Absolutely. And we're in the process of going through an 18-month training called Creating Presence that will result in us being not only trauma informed, but trauma responsive and trauma resilient. So all of our interactions are based on the impact of trauma on behavior and outcomes. But to be able to design our physical space like that as well is just another level, I think, that's really going to lead to success with families. So we really took the housing first approach beginning in 2010 and shifted our mission to solely focus on family homelessness. So
you read the tea leaves basically and saw how the income gap and the rent burden was kind of not matching up. So
Absolutely.
I applaud you for that.
Yeah, and this is the great thing about this organization. It's always kind of the finger on the pulse of the community and what are the needs, what are the issues that our community is facing, and how can we be part of the solution. So in addition to the shelter, we have provided prevention programs. So rental assistance combined with case management, housing stability for families moving out of shelter for a year, 18 months to make sure that they stabilize. And really, all of this is helping families discover their own agency. Right, because our families are survivors, they're resilient, they know how to do this, and so we're just kind of opening the doors for them and reintroducing them to their own agency sometimes after a crisis.
So that kind of brings us right into a great dovetail in talking about COVID, the pandemic, and all nonprofit organizations have had to partner, innovate. Because if anything, this COVID crisis has really thrusted housing to the forefront, the importance of housing. Even for those that are not as vulnerable as others, you can see the role housing or home plays in our everyday life. I work from home. I'm doing this from home. So it has been thrust to the forefront. I'm interested in finding out how this pandemic has affected Friends and the community it serves. Innovative new programs you've put together, partnerships, and so on. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah. And it is kind of the silver lining in the pandemic is things that those of us who have been working in this field for eons know. All of those issues have come to the forefront, and housing is on the tip of everyone's tongue. People are really understanding. We all had to shut down and be at home and face what was happening in our community and decide whether we were okay with that as a community to have people unhoused or just surviving. We have seen a tremendous amount of need. Our requests for services are up by 30%. We are definitely seeing families who have never interacted and never needed assistance in the past. So, first time needing help because of shutdowns from the pandemic. And it ranges from kids being out of school, so mom or dad couldn't work because they had to homeschool, to shutdowns and restaurants closing, to, my hours were reduced and then my car broke down and I also had childcare issues. So I think we're seeing a lot of people who were on the edge really be pushed over the edge, and people who were already drowning just being submerged even more. And the need is incredible. We in April we're all as a group, as a community, talking about the looming eviction crisis and the wave of evictions that we thought were all coming, we all knew. And so as a result of that, and our core belief that the best way to reduce and end people being unhoused is to prevent it in the first place, we convened a group of stakeholders in our community to identify opportunities to address the crisis that we all knew was coming down the pike. So we included judges from our local court system, attorneys, our legal aid representative, county officials. We had at least one expert in the field on our calls and a few landlords. And we were prepared with the data when we had that first meeting. We looked in 2019, there were over 2,500 landlord-tenant complaints filed in our county. We've 17 district courts, and there were almost 900 orders of possession or evictions that ended up happening. So we knew even pre-pandemic it was an issue, and we knew that it would get even worse. So as a result of that meeting, we aligned some action steps, and in September 1st, right after the Commonwealth moratorium was lifted, we piloted the first eviction prevention court in Downingtown District Court. So we chose one court, and the program serves individuals and families. We have staff trained in local landlord-tenant law. We provide free legal services, day of court, access to financial assistance, which is huge, and social service connections for ongoing support for those that need it.
So it becomes kind of an eviction prevention triage. In a manner of speaking, you're trying to address every aspect of it. I'm curious to know what the most difficult aspect of putting this kind of program together. I mean, you are dealing with some different disciplines, obviously, the magisterial court, and you're dealing with attorneys. What was the challenge with this?
The challenge, fortunately, we had a champion on the common pleas level court who liaised for us with the district courts. And I will tell you, the judges were more than willing to pilot this and, welcomed us with open arms. Challenging in the beginning in a pandemic, being on site with several staff members in a small courthouse, dealing with, I think our first day of court, we had 30 people show up for court, plus landlords, plus landlord attorneys. And so we were literally in the parking lot doing intakes. We were like all hands on deck. I think the challenges were the overwhelming need versus our capacity to provide the service. So we chose one district court. As soon as we put out the information, we were getting calls from all areas. And it was really hard to say we're only focused on this one court. Some of the challenges that we fairly easily overcame, we did implemented some changes with the court process. So the judges agreed to do landlord-tenant hearings all in one day. So we weren't in court every day of the week. We could kind of strategize. They also agreed to provide information about the program with the court summons. So when someone gets their notice, they have information readily available. And then they made on-site meeting space available to us within their building. I think another challenge that we faced is, day of, you're triaging, you're moving quickly. So trying to get contact with tenants prior to court, and doing that outreach has been really challenging because the information that's available to us is very limited. And I think that, most people in crisis, you see that letter in the mail with a court stamp on it, you don't open it, because it's bad news.
Yeah.
And so people weren't seeing it. We have our coordinator does a great job. She's knocking on doors, taping it on doors. And I think as we progressed, we got a lot of assistance from the landlords. So we have a couple of landlords that let tenants know. So we're getting that, pre-court contact with the tenant.
That's excellent. And the reason I asked that question is, as you know, we're being watched by many in the Commonwealth, and many of the people watching are members of community benefit organizations or similar organizations to yours that might be interested in looking at a program like this. And I'm hoping that they become inspired to do that, because it's going to take a multifaceted approach to deal with the onslaught of evictions that will come. And I'm sure that they're interested, and I know I'm interested in finding out what your metrics look like to this point. What's your, if we could call it, success rate, so to speak? What can you tell us about that?
It's a work in progress. We have, I would say, probably 80% of the individuals and families we've served have never had contact with the housing system. So, they weren't previously homeless. This is their first time kind of entering, because we enter into a county system, any assistance that we provide. So we're seeing a lot of people for the first time. We've served, at the end of this week, we are actually in court today in one of our courts. We expanded January 4th to 2 additional.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so after the success of the first, and the great thing about that is those judges agreed to do their court on one day, so Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, and then Thursdays all day. So as of the end of this week, we'll have served about 70 individuals and families in the program. We have done probably a majority of pay to stay, where we've worked with landlords to reduce filing fees and costs and negotiated down on back rent. We've been able to access the CARES Act funding, prior to December 14th. So we actually established a partnership with our housing authority who was administering that money. I just got off the phone with them Tuesday and said, can you come to court and sit in the courtroom with a laptop to give us quicker access? And they've agreed to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've negotiated leaving without the eviction, which is huge, like not having that on your record. So there have been a lot of cases where, really our next goal is diversion. So, because if we can get to someone before the eviction's filed, that's even better. I think the research says most landlords wait about 60 days to file. I think it's been a little faster during COVID, especially when the moratorium ended. But a lot of times by the time you're getting to court, that relationship between landlord-tenant is too far gone.
Yeah.
So we've been
damaged.
Yes, too damaged. We've been really successful at talking to the landlord, mediating with the tenant and making an agreement for the tenant to move out without becoming unhoused, getting an extension of time, and not having the eviction on their record. So we have had no one become unhoused under our watch.
And that is an incredible statistic for a program in such a short life.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious as to how you went about approaching landlords. You mentioned earlier that you have some landlords that work with you. How has your landlord outreach been? What have you seen?
Well, it really happened organically in our first court. The Judge Avaloki, was completely on board, and he knew the players, right? He's been doing this, so he knew the landlords that were coming in, and he made the introductions for us. So he kind of sat down and opened the door and said, look, I think this is great. It's going to benefit you. I can't force you. This is voluntary, but here are these people. This is what they're offering. And so it took those first couple of cases where we worked with the landlord. This is not adversarial at all, right? Landlords are struggling too. The majority of landlords we're dealing with are small property owners. We have a few larger properties that are held by big companies, but for the most part, it's tenants, individual property owners that aren't able to pay their mortgage because their rent's not being paid. So it's been a really positive experience all the way around. So after those first couple court sessions, we started getting referrals from landlords prior to filing. Actually, the week before Christmas, I was in the Coatesville District Court to observe because we planned to open January 4th. And a landlord approached me on the break and said, I'm doing a lockout today at 3:00, week before Christmas, of a family with young children. Is there anything you can do? And it wasn't in that court system. It was another jurisdiction. It was Chester County, but not the court. And I said, well, what are you willing to do? And he said, I'll cut the amount in half. And we made it happen that afternoon. That was noon. By 3:00, we had the back rent paid. The family, it was a single mom with a little boy, was able to stay in their home as a result. And that was the landlord reaching out to us.
I can imagine your feeling and that of your team to be able to intervene at the last hour, at the lockout hour. I mean, that's really why you do this. You want to be able to keep people housed.
Yes, absolutely. And the mom, Ava, is our coordinator. She got all the documentation. We filed the court order, and the mom couldn't believe it. She called every day. Are you sure? Are you sure? Send me the copy. I need to see it, because she just, she was ready to go and worried about her belongings. So many, she couldn't get her belongings out. It's just it's a tragedy that we as communities can't come up with a more creative solution when a crisis hits.
I was meeting yesterday with a bunch of people from across the Commonwealth, and we were talking about what is it that we've learned from this COVID experience. And so one of the things I mentioned is we learned that we want to work together more often, that is the only way that we can help both landlords and tenants in this kind of situation. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And I think our systems are sometimes complicated, right? And the last thing anyone needs who's in a crisis is trying to figure out how to navigate complicated systems and get their needs met. So the more that we can collaborate and be on site with a hub of services, and the onus is on us as providers to navigate those systems and to help someone, I think it's better outcomes. At the end of the day, we're saying, doesn't this make much more sense? Isn't this a more dignified way to deliver services and help people?
Absolutely. So for our viewers, if they want more information about your programs, you want to give us your website and your phone number. I'm sure that some of the CEOs from other organizations might actually want to pick your brain on a program like this.
Sure. We'd be happy to. It's www.friendsassoc.org, and our phone number is 610-431-3598.
Thank you, Jennifer, for taking the time to join us and share your great program. I'm very proud of you, and I can't wait to see you grow it to the next level, because I'm sure you will.
Thank you so much for giving us this platform to share the work and, to meet the community's need.
I appreciate it. Now, I want to take a little time to share some parting thoughts for our audience. You might be asking yourself what our topic today has to do with fair housing. And while it might be true that evictions fall into the realm of Pennsylvania landlord-tenant law, there are many cases where the root of an eviction might be discriminatory. What we must remember is that discrimination is subjective, meaning how a person is made to feel during the sale, rental, or financing of housing. Discrimination is more than just what you say or what is said to you. It can also be policies and practices that have a negative impact on an individual that's in a protected class like race, color, national origin, disability, religion, sex, or familial status. For more information, or if you believe you've been a victim of discrimination in housing, visit us at www.phrc.pa.gov or call us at 717-787-9780. That's it for this edition of PHRC Speaks, Fair Housing in the 21st Century. Until next time, be good, take care, and be fair to each other.
This program has been paid for by the sponsor and does not reflect the views of PCN. To get your program on PCN Fusion and for more information, contact info@pcntv.com.